Hi, I'm Kristen Oaks-White.
And I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week.
And this week, the flood of 2016 is the only topic we're covering. The storm system dumped as much as 2 feet of rain in East Baton Rouge, Livingston, and St. Helena parishes in a 48-hour period. Areas west like Lafayette, Iberia saw similar rainfall totals.
That sent rivers like the Tangipahoe, Amite, and Comite into flood, which backed up ditches and bayous and sent water into neighborhoods and fields which had never flooded before. It's something those who study weather for a living have not seen before either.
13 people died in the flood. More than 30,000 were rescued. According to Governor John Bel Edwards, the flood damaged more than 60,000 homes.
President Barack Obama toured damaged homes in Zachary, Louisiana, and pointed out that the federal government has already contributed more than $127 million to the recovery efforts.
Federal assistance alone is not going to be enough to make people's lives whole again. So I'm asking every American to do what you can to help get families and local businesses back on their feet.
During and after this disaster, farmers and ranchers were helping their neighbors get back on their feet. I'll have more on that a little later in the show.
As of now, the damage to agriculture is estimated at $110 million. That's according to the LSU Ag Center.
With corn harvest underway and soybean harvest quickly approaching, both crops are suffering from the downpour of nearly 20 inches of rain. TWILA's Carl Wiggers shows us the devastation farmers are seeing in their fields.
In West Baton Rouge Parish, the Scheck-Snyder brothers are busy harvesting the last 175 acres of their corn crop. After receiving 16 inches of rain on his farm, Donald Scheck-Snyder is finding a disappointing sight in his fields.
This is ugly looking here now.
Here we get a look at the damage Scheck-Snyder could have been facing after a tropical storm bringing both wind and rain.
Yeah, this is something we're lucky it didn't happen widespread. To see the whole field like that would be ugly, but we're really lucky. It's just these small areas that happened in.
This corn that was blown over was not the only damage Scheck-Snyder found. Here is what that sprouting looks like on corn that was not blown to the ground. Not every plant is showing this damage, however, which helps Scheck-Snyder to remain optimistic.
It could be a lot worse. We didn't have the wind with all this rain. If we would have had strong wind, we'd been a lot worse mess. But lucky it was just the rain. We got some sprouting. We have some damage. You know, whether it's 15% damage or not, something I figure somewhere in that area. I mean, we can live with that.
The good news for Scheck-Snyder is that this combine is in the field. A few miles down the road, soybean farmers are not as fortunate. The only way to get through these soybeans are wearing knee-high boots.
That's all underwater. Yeah, it was probably chest deep a couple days ago. This is 7 days since the rain. You almost forget that it gets this bad at times.
Clayton Hurdle farms around 1,000 acres of soybeans in Iberville Parish. Like Scheck-Snyder's corn, Hurdle has beans that are ready for harvest. However, like many farmers across the South, Hurdle is just looking for dry ground following this historic rainfall.
Yeah, it's widespread throughout South Louisiana. I know over in the Lafayette area, I talked to a friend of mine this morning over there, and they've got hit really hard, 25 to 30 inches of rain in a 48-hour period. That's a lot of rain.
Just like the corn up the road, Hurdle is also seeing his beans begin to sprout from inside their pods, ruining that bean.
You don't bring that to the elevator. What happened here is the seed got moisture in it, and now it wants to germinate like you would if you planted it in the ground. It takes its time to sprout and start growing another plant because it's been so wet.
A painful reality for Hurdle is the money that has gone into producing these soybeans, which he considered to be a bumper crop.
Every expense, every fungicide application, every insecticide, everything's there. Everything but the actual harvester going through the machine.
Hurdle also has younger soybeans that he hopes will make up for the significant losses he expects to see in these fields. To keep that hope alive, he's pumping water around the clock off of these fields here. With these sprouting soybeans losing value daily, Hurdle is now simply hoping to survive this bean harvest and move on to sugarcane.
If we can get out of here with a 50% loss and recoup our expenses and start over next year. That's about, that's about a best case scenario right now.
The challenge now for Hurdle and many other farmers with soybeans and sugarcane is getting the beans out of the way in time to plant their cane. Unfortunately for these farmers, the rain in the forecast up to now hasn't offered much promise as to when they can expect to move forward in these flooded fields. In Avery, Chris and I covered the flooding in North Louisiana earlier this year, and the biggest difference between this flood and the flood back in the spring is the fact that in the spring they had time to recover. They had time to replant. They just don't have that option here when they're in the middle of harvest in some of these fields.
Yeah, this is probably the worst possible time for a flood on a farm. You mentioned about the difference last time your father's field flooded up there in Franklin Parish. What did you see different going out this time, going into the fields, and did you have trouble getting around?
I didn't have trouble getting around, honestly, because the farmers weren't even at the farms for the first few days following the flood. They were out parishes away from their own farms helping others, and that was a really cool thing. And Kristen, you're going to show some of that later in the show. As far as differences in the spring and now to see on the farm, it's really hard to tell because when you went out on the farm in March, the corn was this tall. Now it's ready to harvest, so it's really hard to compare for that in that way.
Well, Carl Wiggers, excellent story. Thank you for your coverage. Well, corn and soybeans were not the only crops impacted by the flood of 2016.
Torrential rain drowned harvest-ready rice across Louisiana. From Evangeline to Acadia Parish, rice farmers do what they can to mitigate more than 2 feet of rain over 48 hours. In Evangeline Parish, rain falls from a downspout as Richard Fontenot's harvest-ready rice soaks up more rain at his farm along Highway 10. Fontenot says that he has had historical rainfall there at the farm. Like many farmers in his area, Fontenot explains that many have suffered catastrophic losses across the parish.
I'm fearful of the germination in the field by the seed. We've been in a wet environment for so long between the rainfall and the inundation of water and the flooding in certain areas. I'm afraid we're going to get a tremendous amount of quality loss with the germination of seed out in the field.
According to CBS News, high water in both Louisiana and Arkansas has taken its toll on this year's rice crop. While many Louisiana farmers had already begun harvesting, Arkansas rice growers had just begun their harvest. Arkansas produces nearly half of the rice grown here in the United States. More than 27 inches of rain fell over sugarcane ground in Youngsville over a 24-hour period, leaving much of this year's cane in that area lodged and underwater.
Similarly, heavy rain took its toll on soybeans grown as a rotational crop on sugar farms from Lafayette Parish to Iberville Parish. TWILA's AJ Sabine takes us there.
Breezy sugarcane languishes in floodwater along Savoy Road in Youngsville. This part of Lafayette Parish suffered more than 2 feet of rain over a 24-hour period. As floodwater slowly recedes from this field, farmer Stacy Albert explains how heavy rain pushed down his crop only weeks before harvest begins.
Most of the damage is severe lodging, a little bit of trash where high flooding came up into the fields. For the most part, it's just going to stop the cane from growing right now, where it lodged down, and it's going to concentrate on standing back up, and it's not going to, the growth period is going to stop.
Albert's biggest concern moving forward is getting the ground dried up to plant next year's crop.
And trying to get the planting squeezed into a time frame of the window that we have left. I mean, we're with the mill starting processing on the 27th of September. We're down to about 6 weeks to get a crop planted, and there's very, very little cane planted around here in this area.
In White Castle, sugar grower Ben Giat wrenches on equipment in preparation of planting. However, he's distracted by this. Water rushing out of his near ready to harvest soybeans.
It's devastating to see something that you've tried so hard to make it into something, and to see Mother Nature kind of put her little twist on it. But it's all we can do in a day's time. You know, we've been doing this for a while. We haven't lost any beans in the past, but this year may be a challenging year, but I'm being optimistic.
Being optimistic is likely quite difficult for Giat and others when you consider all the money washed away by weather. Giat says his attitude remains positive as these beans dry out.
Well, I do have a couple hundred acres of beans defoliated, ready to cut. It's been a problem in the past, but right now we're experiencing the wet weather, and the beans are, as you can see, they're wet and they're starting to lodge real good. We're hoping that in the next few days this weather will blow out and we can continue with our harvest.
For sugarman Ricky Roussel, His beans down near Convent are a total loss.
I believe they're lost. I believe they're gone. I got this and some more I'm going to show you in a few minutes. That's like this. Like I said, this water was foot high in this 2 days ago.
Roussel shared with me that more than 20 inches of rain fell on both his soybeans and his sugarcane crop. While his sugar will likely recover from the rain, as you saw there, his soybean crop unfortunately can't recover from that much rain and subsequent flooding. Guys?
AJ, you've been in the news business for a very long time. How did this storm compare to Katrina, Rita, Ike, all of the other devastating storms that we've had in the last few years in Louisiana?
Well, Kristen, you're right. I've seen a lot over my time here at the Louisiana Farm Bureau, but I have to tell you, I think in terms of just overall destruction, Hurricane Rita was by far, when you think about the storm surge, the fact that it hit in a less urbanized part of Louisiana, the wind and the rain, not to mention drowning cattle and everything that we've seen in the past. I think that there's really no comparison. I think on the other side of that, the fact that this wasn't a named storm and people didn't have time to prepare, to pack things, to get those boats ready and get supplies, really has had a tremendous impact on not only the recovery effort, but in terms of how much coverage that has had in the national media.
That's very true, and it happens at a very bad time for farmers across the board. AJ Sabine, thanks.
With so much damage over such a large area, the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry is holding meetings across the state to help farmers and ranchers recover.
Here you see Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry Dr. Mike Strain addressing farmers in Opelousas. This meeting followed a similar one in Vermilion Parish. It was here that those involved in agriculture heard from Louisiana Farm Bureau President Ronnie Anderson and State FSA Director Craig McCain. Strain says farmers and ranchers who had losses during the flood need to meet with the FSA and document everything.
Keep a notebook. Everything that you're going, every loss that you incurred, every additional expense, keep a record of that, because in the event that we can help you, you have to have the records. And to think that you can remember what you did a week ago, you're going to forget those things.
To find out about future meetings, follow us on Facebook and we'll post them there. Well, by the way, even the federal government was not immune to this flood.
Not at all. In fact, the USDA office in Crowley took on water and is temporarily closed. That office housed both the FSA and NRCS offices. However, that does not mean farmers and ranchers do not have access to the services they need. Louisiana FSA Director Craig McCain says the people who worked in that office are still working in the field.
We can serve them. They can continue to call the office. Their calls will be forwarded to an adjacent office where we have personnel on duty. The employees of the Acadia office are available in other sites to provide service, and we hope to be back in temporary quarters there in Crowley within the next 14 to 21 days.
Again, follow us on Facebook. We'll post any updates to that story there.
Still to come on TWILA, we look at what many of you were posting online about the flood.
But first, farmers helping those around them. Stay with us. When last week's catastrophic flood devastated parts of South Louisiana, many of the state's farmers and ranchers left their fields to assist others.
Some launched boats into flooded waters, while others ripped sheetrock and grilled burgers for hungry residents. No matter the task, Louisiana farmers were first in line to help their neighbors in need. It's lunchtime here in Denham Springs, and the line stretches across the parking lot as Farm Bureau volunteers hustle to feed a hungry crowd.
We may do as many as 1,200, 1,500 burgers before 1 o'clock today. It's been a tremendous turnout, and a lot of volunteers have helped us.
Farmers and volunteers from across the state teamed up to grill burgers and provide meals for more than 1,200 residents and relief workers in Livingston Parish.
We're just trying to feed the people who are doing all the hard work that they're tearing down and tearing out of their homes. And we're just trying to give them a meal that they can, so they can get back to work and try to get on with trying to just regain their lives.
Livingston Parish Farm Bureau member Billy Dwalron packs to-go lunches to deliver to families in the area. He says residents here are still picking up the pieces after last week's flood devastated more than 70% of the homes in the parish.
We're just trying to help them out. So there's one less thing for them to worry about is providing a meal, and thankfully Farm Bureau was able to come out today and cook burgers. And so I'm just out delivering burgers for people working and just try to help them out any way I possibly can. All past week I've been helping out my family. They've all lost parts of their homes, so we've been helping them all week.
The story is the same across the area. farmers lending a hand to help their neighbors.
Good.
From cooking chicken and delivering supplies to packing sandbags and pulling sheetrock. Farmers and ranchers are doing their part to help their neighbors in times of need.
We got farmers that are taking their planting crews and bringing them over to help strip houses because it's too wet to plant.
Louisiana Farm Bureau President Ronnie Anderson says that farmers are the lifeblood of their communities, and it's important that they support each other during disasters like this.
I think it's the idea that somebody cares, somebody's, concerned about them. They know they're in trouble, we know they're in trouble, and we're out here trying to help. And the worst thing that could happen when you have something like this is to be forgotten, but the idea that somebody cares, and it's really it makes you feel good, but we're doing good work and good deeds for those folks.
The Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation Livestock Committee activated their hay clearinghouse to coordinate hay donations for ranchers or cattlemen who need it due to the flooding. If you need hay, have hay to donate, or just want to find out more information about the program, visit our website at twilatv.org. And I talked to Amelia Kent, who's kind of organizing some of the efforts this go around, and she said that the difference in this flood and versus the spring flood is that they are having trouble finding square bales. They need square bales because most of these people that need hay are smaller producers. They're horse producers, not big rural cattle producers.
Well, I know the other issue that they had last time, transportation, needing people to truck it. So be sure, if you can truck hay, I'm sure they'd like to hear from you as well. Neighbors helping neighbors. That's been the underlying theme as this disaster unfolds, especially on social media.
For every gut-wrenching photo of a home destroyed by floodwater, I have seen a surge of posts from people who are collecting relief supplies, pitching in to help their friend move furniture, or delivering lunch to a hungry family. An ocean of good deeds filled my newsfeed in the days after the flood.
From the beginning, social media served as a vital tool for communication during this disaster. News stations posted weather reports forecasting a monster storm and flash flood warnings days before the rain began to engulf South Louisiana. Severe flooding and power outages knocked out cell service for thousands of AT&T customers in Baton Rouge and surrounding areas. So many people turned to Facebook Messenger to communicate with their friends and family.
Facebook also enacted their disaster response safety check feature for users in the flood-affected areas. This feature allows people to check on the status of their friends and family and also to tell loved ones that they are safe during a disaster or crisis.
I marked myself safe as well. Social media has also played a significant role in keeping the rest of the country up to date on the situation. While most of the national news outlets focused on the Olympics or the presidential election, social media was the first to expose the devastation of the flooding in Louisiana.
Many Twitter and Facebook users shared images of the flooding and its tragic effects. Photos of people leaving their homes by boat, a child floating in a plastic box, and countless images of homes turned inside out and streets lined with couches, refrigerators, and sheetrock. Photos of flooded sugarcane fields and cattle stranded on an island surrounded by floodwater were less common, but just as painful.
Snapchat featured Louisiana flooding as a live story with a collection of videos and photos from Louisiana for all users to see. They even shared one of our videos from the Louisiana Farm Bureau cookout in Denham Springs that more than 500,000 people watched.
Social media's outrage over the lack of national media coverage sparked the attention of celebrities like Taylor Swift, who donated $1 million to the state's disaster relief fund. And presidential candidate Donald Trump flew into Baton Rouge with a donation of supplies and $100,000.
Kindness and generosity were displayed from all corners of social media. Neighboring states and organizations reached out to help Louisiana flood victims. Former Baton Rouge residents collected donations and made special trips back to lend a helping hand.
As people posted their recovery efforts on social media, we watched Louisiana's Good Samaritans turn into everyday heroes online. The armada of volunteer boaters known as the Cajun Navy. The hard-to-find supplies, mold remover, gloves, and all of those Rubbermaid boxes, everyday items became golden deliveries for homeowners. The hashtags that gave us hope in the midst of a very messy situation, and the laundry angels who simply washed load after load of flood-soaked clothing for friends who lost everything. Social media displayed people coming together to meet the needs of their neighbors and communities. I truly believe that social media has been the unsung hero of the Great Flood of 2016. It connected us to each other, told our story to the rest of the world, and shined a light on all of the good deeds around us. The overwhelming generosity and hope displayed on social media has helped to unify our community and make this tragedy a little easier for everyone to bear.
Yeah, definitely. It was a great way to keep up with all my friends and family throughout all of this.
And it was good to see what everybody was doing to help, and it really was contagious. When you saw someone do something, it made you want to do something to help too. So
absolutely,
it was a good tool during this disaster.
Well, still to come on TWILA, the personal impact of the flood.
Stay with us.
This flood was indiscriminate. You may have noticed that last week we did not have a new show. That's because I am one of the flood victims. So is my boss, Carrie Martin, the Director of Information and Public Relations for the Louisiana Farm Bureau. And so is the young lady who made this graphic right here, Louisiana Farm Bureau graphic designer Monica Velasquez. Here's a bit of what we were doing over the last 2 weeks.
It is at least halfway. It's kind of hard to tell in the video because of the reflection of the water, but it's almost to the top of our wooden fence that surrounds the yard.
That's Carrie Martin on his first return home following the flood. He took his kayak inside where he found his wood floor floating, and his son found a new way to get upstairs.
Hey, you made it. Cody made it up the stairs.
Once the water went down, there was muck everywhere in Carrie's house, and it was time to tear out anything holding water. For Monica Velasquez, she had just moved back in with her mother in Ponchatoula when their house flooded. Here you see Monica with a bunch of our coworkers from the Louisiana Farm Bureau who spent the day gutting her house. And that is water flowing from my backyard to the front. The sound is one my wife and sons heard as we took refuge from the flood upstairs. We only stayed there 4 hours before Daniel Tassin came with his four-wheeler and rescued us. I took this video riding through the Lowe's parking lot on Millerville Road in Baton Rouge with my son Luke right in front of me. Okay, here's the return. We got back in the next day to begin ripping out carpet and drywall. The pile of debris in front of my house has grown since I took this picture, which means the inside is almost ready for us to rebuild. I would not be standing right here talking to you and covering what we've been covering if it weren't for my Louisiana Farm Bureau family. Assistant to the President Jim Monroe was the first one to go out to my house once the floodwaters had receded. A.J. Sabine, Kristen Oakes, Neil Melanson and his wife Sherry, Greg Fox, so many people with the Louisiana Farm Bureau came to my house and took out drywall, took out my furniture, made it so that we are ready to rebuild, to recover. And I think that says a lot about the organization which produces this TV show, This Week in Louisiana Agriculture. We have a Farm Bureau family. Overall, across the Farm Bureau and all of its companies, more than 65 people were impacted by the storm. What I think is amazing is all the others who were not immediately stepped up and started helping those of us who were. And without that kind of support, we wouldn't be able to do the job we do. And I think that says a lot about our agriculture community as a whole and what it is that farmers and ranchers bring to Louisiana and the United States. Well, that does it for this edition of TWILA. Be sure to join us next week when we'll continue our coverage of the flood of 2016. Until then, you can watch all of our stories online at twilatv.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For all of us here at TWILA, including Kristen Oakes, who went out and bought me shoes when I didn't have any, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again right here next week.